Howdy folks, welcome back to War Thunder Ground Forces beta test with the mighty Jingles. I had to suffer some trials and tribulations to get onto the test server today, I can tell you that for nothing. It took me approximately 3.5 hours to get on, due to various reasons. First of all, the server was up much later than advertised, and secondly, it was hilarious. When I did manage to get on, the only tech tree it would allow me to even look at were the Americans, and the Americans don't have any tanks, as you can see here. It's aircraft only, and in order to access the German or the Russian tech trees, which have the tanks, the game was telling me I had to first fly 9 battles with the current nation, and American reserve aircraft. Oh, fair enough. So I selected my Americans. This country is temporarily unavailable. Well played, Gaijin. Well played. And thanks to a couple of the guys in general chat, Vazarus is the name that I remember. He told me that I had to go in and delete a configuration file and then basically download the whole bloody thing again. So it was a massive pain in the arse, but I'm very happy to be able to tell you it's so worth it. I have had a lot of fun tonight. I say tonight, it's more like this morning. It was something like 4 o'clock in the morning before I finally managed to start playing. But it was definitely worth the wait. At least as soon as I got out of the reserve tanks. The German reserve tank. The Panzer IIc is terrible. But that's entirely historically accurate, you know. The Panzer IIc was a terrible tank. A lot of people take it for granted that the Germans built the best tanks in the Second World War. Well, they certainly didn't at first, and it's even arguable whether or not they did towards the end of the war. Yeah, the Panther, the Tiger, they were good machines. When they worked, they didn't work very often. And certainly at the beginning of the war, machines like this little thing here, the Panzer II, it wasn't that good a tank. What made the Germans so successful in the early stages of the Second World War wasn't the quality of the machines they were driving, it was the quality of the crews, the tactics that they used, and the fact that their tanks all had radios, so they could coordinate the tactics amongst the Panzer divisions. Here in War Thunder, this machine, well, it's pretty quick. You've got to give it that. It will do 44 kilometers per hour, and it's very maneuverable. But the gun is terrible. It really is bad. Just to give you an example, the frontal hull armor on this thing is 35 millimeters thick. That 20 millimeter cannon can't even penetrate itself. It ranges in excess of 10 meters. It really isn't. Oh, it's just a bad little tank. Although, you know, as long as the enemy are fielding T-26s, which is the Soviet reserve tank, that thing only has 15 millimeters of armor at the most. So the Panzer IIc can at least penetrate the T-26 at ranges of 500 meters or less. And those are your typical combat engagement ranges in War Thunder Ground Forces. So, you know, just hope the enemy team doesn't have any Panzer IIcs. But again, you know, Gaijin make no apologies for this. This is entirely historically accurate. It was superior German tactics, not superior German tanks, that got them so far in Russia in the early stages of Operation Barbarossa. Meanwhile, back to the game. And, you know, and that's the other thing, because this is the focus of this version of the Ground Forces beta test. It's testing the tech trees. If you have a look at, for example, the German tech tree, and let's look at the tanks rather than the aircraft, because we all know what the aircraft look like. You start off with nothing. If you've just logged back onto the test server from previous versions of the test, you'll find your account has been reset, and all you have available is the Panzer IIc for the Germans and the T-26 for the Russians. It's just the reserve tanks, and as you can see, I've been busy, and it hasn't taken long to get down to the Panzer IIIL in the German tech tree, as well as unlocking the Stug 3A. And that's what the purpose of this phase of the beta test is. It's testing progression through the tech trees. And it seems to be working reasonably well. I mean, the Panzer II-C down here is bloody awful, but even if you have the worst possible games in your first couple of games, you're not going to be playing more than 2 or 3 battles at the most in this reserve tank before you move on to bigger and better things. And let's not forget, it's a reserve tank. It's not supposed to be any good. And my experience has been pretty positive. It really, really has. Once I got out of this thing, because it's really bad, I have been having a lot of fun. Much more so than on previous versions of the test server. Because I've finally gotten my head around the idea that this ain't World of Tanks. It just plays completely differently. It's a lot more realistic. You can and often do get taken out in one shot. Usually from tanks that you have no idea where they are. If you get frustrated when you're playing World of Tanks because you're constantly getting shot by invisible tanks that haven't been spotted and you've got no idea where the fire is coming from, you probably want to stay away from War Thunder Ground Forces, because if you play this game like you play World of Tanks, that is going to happen to you over and over and over again. And I don't think that's a bad thing. World of Tanks has its own market. It's very much an arcade tank game. War Thunder Ground Forces, while it has an arcade mode, is a much more realistic arcade mode. And I think that's great. I think that there is room for both, and I have been having a lot of fun playing both. Once I got my head around the idea that this was not World of Tanks and driving vehicles in this game the same way that you do in World of Tanks just gets you killed over and over and over. So, well, what exactly has changed on this version of the test server? Well, a couple of things. Obviously, your accounts have been reset, and the vehicles that are available in the tech trees, well, as you can see if you look here at the Germans, you've got your light tanks over here, which pretty much don't lead anywhere. You've got the Czechoslovakian Panzer 38T, you've got the Panzer II-C, which is a reserve, rank 1, Panzer 38, another rank 1, later version of the Panzer II, the Model F version. Then you've got your Panzer IIIs, which lead to the Tiger, you've got your Panzer IVs, which lead to the Panther, you've got your Flak Panzer, and this is a new vehicle. I'll just show you how this looks. There we go. Check that out, 37mm Flak 36 cannon. I really like the look of that. But anyway, and then of course you've got your assault guns, the Stug 3A, the Stug 3F, the Jagdpanzer 4, and the Panzer 470. Oh, of course it's the, looks like it's got the Pak 42 cannon. Okay, yep, and the Russians. Well, you've got your BT7, which leads to your T34 line, all kinds of different T34s via the T50. You've got your T26, which leads to the T28, and your heavy tank line, including the KV-1, with a ZIS-5 gun. You've got the KV-2, a KV with an 85mm gun, which leads onto the IS. Also with an 85mm gun, the T60, T70 and T80 light tank line. Then you've got your self-propelled, well, not self-propelled guns, your assault guns, your tank destroyers, the ZIS-30, Su-76M, Su-122, Su-85, Su-152 and Su-85M. And then the Russians also get this little thing here, an anti-aircraft gun. It's a 25mm flatbed mounted anti-aircraft gun. So those are your two tech trees. One other thing I've noticed is that certainly the first time I started playing War Thunder Ground Forces, there were, it was a little rough around the edges. As to be expected, it's a beta test. But things that you would expect to have been implemented, like the button that you press to repair your tracks when they get blown off, weren't. And you usually found out the hard way. When your tracks had been blown off and you're presented with a battle message saying, your tank has been immobilized, press undefined to begin repairing your tracks, and that's really not a lot of help. And you would have to go in and set up various different keys to perform various different actions in battle. Things like calling in artillery, well, not really artillery, off-screen mortar attacks, when you'd unlock that on your light tanks. It was all well and good unlocking it in the tech tree, as you can see. If you got my vehicle modifications on the Panzer IIc, I've got it there, artillery support, but until you actually went in and set up the key it was bound to, you couldn't actually use it. Of course, you didn't find out until you needed to use it that you hadn't set up the key in order to use it. Well, all that sort of thing is now taken care of for you, you know, as well it should be. Also, new things like certain of the, well, in fact, most so far, of the games that I've taken part in, you don't get unlimited respawns anymore. What happens now, certainly in the battles that are currently being played here on the test server, even the arcade battles, is that after 2 minutes from the game start, respawns stop. So if you have a terrible game and lose your tank in the first 2 minutes of the game, whether you crash the thing or you just go charging off and get obliterated, you can pick another tank from your lineup. But once those 2 minutes are up, you lose your tank, you're out the game. Now, I don't know if that is how they want all arcade battles to go in future, or whether they're just testing a specific new game mode, but it doesn't really seem to affect my enjoyment of the battles that I have played. They have still been fun. Speaking of which, let's just get straight in and show you some of the games, because I have been having an immense amount of fun driving these tanks on the test server. As you can see, I've unlocked a couple. I've got the Stug 3, Model A, 75mm short barrel gun, 37mm armed Panzer IIIe, and the 50mm armed Panzer IIIF. And I've been having just pots and pots of fun driving these things around. So let's show you some of the games. So, the Panzer IIc, and it really is pretty terrible, but not completely useless, because you do get to unlock that off-map artillery support upgrade. So even at these sort of ranges where your 20mm gun has no hope of penetrating anything other than maybe the side of a tank destroyer, you can still spot enemy tanks and direct some effective fire onto them. Takes a couple of seconds for the mortars to actually reach the target zone, so it's not much use against a moving target. That ZIS-30 just took a shot at me. But it's a very, very useful weapon to use against people capturing a flag, for example. Now, the ZIS-30 has almost no armour, and even my 20mm is able to penetrate him at this sort of range. But this is the old bad habits from World of Tanks coming into play. I know that he knows I'm here. He just took a shot at me, and that's an anti-tank gun, and I'm only in a light tank, and I shouldn't be hanging around here while he's aiming in at me, because while my 20mm can hurt him, he only has to hit me once. It's a harsh lesson, but you know, you can learn it the easy way or you can learn it the hard way. Well, it really doesn't take long to get out of the reserve vehicles, as I mentioned earlier, even if you suck, and my games in the Panzer IIc mostly sucked. 2-3 games at the most, you'll be driving a Panzer III, or you'll be driving a Panzer IV, or you'll be driving a Stug. It does not take long at all. This game, however, was the first Panzer III game I played, and it was really frustrating. But it was frustrating because my team were too good. And of course, you know, matters weren't helped by the enemy team all shooting each other up. I had a real hard time just trying to find something to shoot at in this game. It did give me the opportunity to make a couple of observations, however. My initial fear when we started playing the big tanks on the test server in the last testing round was that this game was going to be very campy, and it certainly can be, but this match in particular was anything but. Very aggressive, mostly Russian team. Game was a little laggy though. You may notice the video chopping up every now and then. But this team didn't mess around. They just charged forward, got stuck in and killed absolutely everything, usually long before I got the chance to even point the gun at anything that looked vaguely threatening. But, you know, you see it on the test server in World of Tanks as well. That's how the Russians play their tank games. They really do not give shit, number one. So, you know, it didn't leave an awful lot for me to shoot at, playing cautiously, as I usually do. But when I did finally, and it was literally the last enemy tank alive on the enemy team, when I did finally find something to attack, it was glorious. I've actually had to edit out around about 5 or 6 minutes of gameplay, which literally consisted of nothing but me driving around with nothing to shoot at. And I got so desperate I started shooting up anti-aircraft guns just so I could say I'd killed something. There's one enemy tank left alive, and I spot that shot going out. I'm thinking, hang on. Enemy tank! Oh my god! Swerve the tank around, floor the accelerator, put one into him, damage his suspension, he can't turn, and I just think, screw it. Ramming speed! Oh, that's going to leave a mark in the morning, and it set him on fire. Oh, man. You know, worth it. And I don't even care that this BT-7 comes around the corner and steals the kill off me. Because that was fun. Well, anyway, my first game in the Stug 3A. And obviously, my first game, I haven't unlocked any of the high explosive anti-tank ammunition yet. My choices are purely armor piercing or high explosive, so I go for a full armor piercing loadout. But the Stug 3A is only a rank 1 vehicle. It does not take very long at all to unlock all of the good stuff for this little assault gun. In fact, this was my first game in the Stug 3A, and after this match I had unlocked almost every single modification available on this tank. I think I managed to get everything but one. We'll find out at the end of the game. And the high explosive anti-tank ammunition for this gun has 82mm of penetration at all ranges. And while it's nice to have, you don't really need it. The standard 75mm armor piercing ammunition for this short barreled 75mm gun has 35mm of penetration at ranges of up to 500 meters and 43mm of penetration at ranges of 100 meters or less. And this is only a tier 1 vehicle. It's perfectly adequate to deal with the kind of threats that you're going to face, as you're going to see in this particular battle. Now, yes, I am sitting in the middle of an open field, but I've got a low stone wall protecting my flank to the right. And the only things in front of me are Panzer IICs. There's a T60 up there. I know the Panzer IICs cannot penetrate me from the front. The T60, well, he is 600 meters away, which is the important part, more than 500 meters. So I'm reasonably sure he can't penetrate me from this range either. Of course, that does work both ways. The penetration of my 75mm gun at ranges between 500 and 1000 meters drops down to 30mm. So I can penetrate that T60 if I hit him in the right spot. But hitting them in the right spot is going to be difficult, because the thing about this stubby 75mm gun on the early version of the Stug is it's a lot like firing a howitzer. It's a very low velocity 75mm round. It takes time for that shot to reach the target. It's not very good at dealing with moving targets, and while the T60 isn't exactly moving much, he's not exposing much of his tank from my angle either. Now you can see the cursor changes colour, much as it does in World of Tanks, to indicate in arcade mode whether or not you can penetrate where your point of aim is. Of course, your point of aim and where the shot actually goes are not always the same thing. Anyway, one hell of a firefight breaking out in front of me, and I'm getting bored of shooting at that T60. Especially when there's a Panzer IIC 200 meters in front of me, and he cannot penetrate my frontal armour. So there's my first kill. Pull back behind the rock because Well, they obviously all know where I am now, and there's an enemy Stug down that road, and there's this 30 just popped up 300 metres in front of me. Two self-propelled anti-tank guns there that I would rather not give opportunities to shoot at me. Speaking of which, I mean, I'm quite safe here as long as I've got this rock between me and the Zis 30 and the Stug. I'm not worried about the Panzer IIs, but that T60, there he is. I'm surprised he didn't take an opportunity to take a shot at my side when I went around to take that Panzer II. But now it looks... Well, that was a gutsy move. He managed to get down off the ridge and out of everybody's line of fire, and he could be... Well, I've only played this map twice, and the first time was about a month and a half ago, so I really don't know enough about the terrain over there to be able to predict where that T60 is going to go. So screw the T60, there are tanks in front of me. I'll make maximum use of this rock wall in front of me. Whoop, that's not quite what I meant. There we go. So my frontal glacis plate should be protected from enemy fire by that rock wall in front of me. Not worried so much about taking fire from the Panzer IIs, but that Zis 30 in front of me could potentially put a shot through my frontal glacis. Because now he's going to have to get through this rock wall first. And this Panzer is not showing a lot of his tank, as you can see. I mean, the on 75mm loads surprisingly quickly though, substantially faster than a 50mm gun in a Panzer III, for example. So it's one of those, well, it doesn't really matter if it's not that accurate and takes forever to reach the target, just keep firing. Target undamaged. This is War Thunder's way of saying, that one bounced. I'm taking some hits, but it's suspension damage only. I can live with that. Oh, set him on fire. It's only a matter of time now. There we go. God, made a meal of that one. And I am taking... I did kind of think, oh god no, I've stayed exposed here for too long, until I realised, well actually it's only a flak Panzer, a T26, and a Panzer II. And now it's just a T26 and a Panzer II. Flak Panzer, the more immediate threat, he could be upgraded with... oh, there's another Panzer II. The Flak Panzer had more of a shot at the side of my tank, but it was heavily angled, and he had to get through the suspension first. Wow, somebody's firing. Looks like high explosive. But yeah, that's the reason why I went for the Flak Panzer first. If he had moved up, he could have put shots through my flank. Similar position there with this Panzer II. He's been very annoying. Of course he knows that I can one-shot kill him. So while he wants to get up here and around my flank, because it's the only prayer he has of penetrating me, he doesn't want to be he doesn't want to die before he can do it. Unfortunately, he's run out of friends and options. And it looks like there's absolutely nobody left alive to my front other than him, so I'm going to charge him down. Load the shotgun. Booyah. And a 5-kill streak, which is nice. But notice the difference that range makes. Particularly when you're using a very short, low-velocity 75mm gun like you get in the Stug 3A. The number of shots I had to put into, well, ineffective shots into that T60 and the first Panzer II that I was shooting at because of the range, compared to how easily I was able to kill the Flak Panzer, the T26, and the last Panzer IIc once I got to close range, ranges of 200 meters or less. It's very much like using a shotgun, this stubby 75mm gun. And coming up is the only real problem I found with the whole testing the research tree thing. It's asking me now, okay, which vehicle do you want to research next? And I have absolutely no idea. I know I want to go towards the Tiger, but I don't know which of these vehicles leads to it. There's no way of checking, and it doesn't give me the option of deciding later. I have to just pick a vehicle and hope it's the right one. Yeah, there's got to be a better way of picking which vehicle you're going to research next than, well, playing pin the tail on the donkey, which is what that is. It wouldn't be so bad if it gave you the option of just saying, actually, no, I don't want to choose now. I'll go to the research tree once I can actually look at the research tree, see which vehicles I want, and then pick the one that leads to that vehicle, rather than just asking me to cover my eyes and randomly pick a tank. So, yeah, that could be better. And that is really the only significant problem I've come across while playing on this current version of the test server, given that that's exactly the sort of thing we're supposed to be testing. The functionality of the research and the upgrading the vehicles. And as you can see, certainly at this stage of the testing process, I mean, this is my first game in the Stug 3. It was a good game. 5 ground kills. There we go. The Anti-Mech Award, that's their equivalent of the Fighter Ace. And I've unlocked the ability to post on the forums. Yay! And, yeah, some of the random rubbish. But that one game, and I didn't even finish first. That was another guy who got 6 kills. Wow, that's just sick. One game unlocked all but 2, I think, of the upgrades available on the Stug 3. So it really does not take very long down at these low levels, and that's the way it should be. It should be encouraging you to make progress by throwing the unlocks at you when you're down here at tier 1, and that's exactly what it does. So there you go, War Thunder Ground Forces closed beta test, current state of play, testing progression through the tech trees. There's still some great tanks in there for you to play around with, and I have been having a lot of fun, much more so on this version of the test server than on previous versions of the test server. I mean, I did have a blast driving the KV2 around a couple of months back and just derping everybody in the face with 152mm high explosive shells. I mean, that never gets old. It doesn't matter whether you're playing War Thunder or World of Tanks, that's always hilarious. But I did struggle with, the more conventional tanks, the T-34s, the Panthers, the Tigers. And I think that was purely down to the fact that this really does, even in arcade mode, play a lot more realistically than World of Tanks. And that's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it's just a different thing. You will soon find out for yourself whether or not this is your cup of tea. I didn't think I was going to enjoy it as much as I do World of Tanks at first, but I feel like I've adapted to the different play style, and I am actually having a lot of fun. So that is the current state of play in War Thunder Ground Forces beta test. I've been having a lot of fun, and I hope to be bringing you more War Thunder Ground Forces beta test videos in the near future. As always, folks, take care on that battlefield, and I'll catch you next time.